Jason here with the Magma Chamber, and today we are doing a retrospective of my favorite band, Rush. So yes, this is a metal channel, and what does Rush have to do with metal? Well, lots of things if you really think about it. If you're thinking of the extreme side of metal as far as tech death and progressive metal and progressive death metal and things like that, those bands all owe something to Rush. We're going to give an example here a little bit later on with one of my favorite extreme metal bands and how they kind of took some influence from Rush a little bit. So we're going to talk about that later on. This isn't so much an album ranking. This is just a retrospective of their career and their albums and things like that. I'll give my opinion on some of their albums and whatnot. But this is my favorite band. I own every one of their albums, lots of their live albums, and they have lots of live albums. So it's really hard for me to rank these. I mean, there are some that I listen to maybe more often than others, but I like every one of their albums, even the keyboard albums that we'll get into a little bit later on. So since they have such a long career and so many albums to talk about, this is going to be a multi-part series. So in this first part, we're just going to go up a few albums into their career and stop there, and in the next episode we'll pick up with a few more albums and so on and so forth. So lots to talk about here with Rush. So if you're not familiar with Rush, they're a Canadian band, a three-piece, and they had a long career. We lost Neil Peart a few years ago, and that was pretty much the end of the band. Unfortunately, he was amazing, which we'll talk about Neil a little bit more as time goes on. Don't know what the future plans of the band are now that Neil is gone. Haven't seen anything about what Alex and Geddy are going to be doing, but anyway, they're a Canadian band made up by Geddy Lee on bass, keyboards, and vocals, Alex Lifeson on guitars, and I think he may do a little backing vocals here and there, and the professor himself, Neil Peart, or Pert, on drums. So amazing stuff. So we're just going to kind of start with their first album, 1974's Rush, self-titled album. Pretty simple album cover here. It's just the name Rush, like just coming at you, right? And so what some people may not realize about this album is Neil Peart. I always used to call him Pert, but I think it's Peart. So if I say Pert, forgive me. He's not on this record. Their very first album featured a man named John Rutsey on drums. Now, he wasn't quite the drum virtuoso that Neil Peart is, or was. But he's solid on here. I mean, what they wrote was just a straightforward rock record, kind of reminiscent of Led Zeppelin, Blue Cheer, things like that Rush's influences, Cream, and he was solid through the whole album. So this record featured songs like Finding My Way, Take a Friend, What You're Doing, and then their biggest hit from this album, Working Man, which they always played live all through the years. Great song there. And the song Working Man, there was a radio station in Cleveland, Ohio that started playing Working Man, and people were calling in going, "What's that new Led Zeppelin song?" And it wasn't Led Zeppelin, it was Rush, but it had that Zeppelin influence to it. And so we can thank that radio station in Cleveland, Ohio, in the city, and the people of Cleveland, Ohio, for making Rush more popular in the States. So this was a great album. It tends to get overlooked sometimes other than Working Man, but I love a lot of songs from this record, and I listen to this just as much as any other Rush album. So great stuff here. And then the very next year, 1975, that brought us Fly By Night with the Owl album cover. And one thing that you may notice as we go through these albums is that the Rush name was always in a different font or a different logo on each album. Like, they never repeated the same look of their name on each album, so that was kind of cool. They always found a way to reinvent themselves with every album. This brought on Terry Brown as their producer for the first time, and he would work with these guys for many albums, and some would say some of their best albums. Terry Brown, and this is a great record. This brought in Neil Peart on drums for this record, and you obviously notice a big change in the drum department. The songs are a little bit more technical. The first song on here, Anthem, is incredible. I mean, it's pretty much a metal song. It's pretty awesome. You have songs like Beneath, Between, Behind, Vitor and Snow Dog, which I really love. I love that song. I guess my only complaint is it kind of chills out in the middle, and it's kind of this weird psychedelic, atmospheric stuff going on in the middle of the song. And then I would say it goes on a little bit too long, and then the song kicks back in and it just rocks for the rest of it. But I think they could have at least shortened that section. It almost kind of reminds me of Rime of the Ancient Mariner from Iron Maiden, where it kind of gets into that weird section in the middle and then it picks back up, sort of like that, but a jamming song nonetheless. And of course the title track, Fly By Night. Some other great songs. In the End is how the album ends. That's a great song as well. But Fly By Night, incredible. And this is the lineup for the rest of their career. These three guys, Alex, Neil, and Geddy. So this was it. The lineup was intact. So fantastic stuff. The very next year, we get their third album, Caress of Steel. I'll say that this album is probably the one I go back to the least, and it's not because it's a bad album. I guess just not enough. It sort of seems like it's a transitional album to their more like straightforward rock-based stuff into what the next album would become. This album featured a couple of longer tracks, more epic songs, and you know, it didn't really sell all that well, and the record label was kind of mad at Rush. They said, you know, how are we supposed to sell this? You know, you have a song on here called I Think I'm Going Bald, and you know, we can't play these long epic tracks on the radio. So Rush was really feeling down. You know, they felt like their career was almost over, and the label said, you've got one more chance. And so Rush said, well, you know what, if this is going to be our last chance to do what we really want to do, we're going to go out swinging. And so in 1976, they released the album 2112. So even if you're not familiar with Rush, I guarantee you've probably seen this album cover somewhere with the star. It's not a pentagram, it's not a satanic album. The star represents kind of the concept of this album, which was the Solar Federation. Basically the story of the song 2112, the title track, it takes up the whole first half of the album, is that it's in the year 2112, music has been outlawed. There are these, basically the government is run by these priests, and music has been outlawed. It's like a long time ago that even anybody's seen an instrument or anything. And so this guy finds an old guitar and he starts to play it and realize, hey, this makes music, this is really cool. He goes before the priest of the temples of Syrinx and tells them, look what I found, this is incredible. And they're like, that's an old thing, that's an old toy, nobody cares about that stuff. And so they kind of shut him down. And he goes and has visions and things of what could be, and he basically creates a revolution through music. So it's really awesome. They took a big risk at putting out such a long, epic, complex first half of an album, and it paid off. People loved it, and the record label was like, okay, you guys are good to do what you want to do. So this is a fantastic album. The B-side has songs like Passage to Bangkok, Tears, Twilight Zone, Lessons, and Something for Nothing, which is a jamming way to end the album. I would say that the second half of this album, to me, is not quite as strong as the title track in the first half, and I don't think it's as strong as the second half of the albums that would come next. But great stuff nonetheless. This is a classic. I think this was one of the first Rush albums I bought, was 2112, just for reputation alone. But fantastic stuff. So Rush was off and running. So after that, they released a live album called All the World's a Stage. This is incredible. This is a great live album. Some of the best Rush you're going to find is on their live albums, and you could probably just buy their live albums and get the very best, because that was the way to see Rush, was live. And when you listen to it, it almost sounds like a studio recording, but it's not. It's just that they were that good live. Everything was so precise and accurate, incredible stuff. So for the larger part of their career, Rush had this way of, they would release like 4 albums and then they do a live album, and 4 albums and then a live album, just to kind of chronicle those last few albums. So this covered the first 4 records, self-titled, Fly By Night, Caress of Steel, and 2112. So you had great renditions of Bastille Day, Anthem, Fly By Night, Something for Nothing, Lakeside Park, the entire 2112 suite, Vitor and the Snow Dog, In the End, Working Man, of course, and What You're Doing. So a good representation of the first 4 albums. So after that, they kind of continue on with long epic songs and, getting more progressive and more technical and things like that, but still accessible at the same time. It wasn't something that was just a bunch of wankery and you just lose interest. I mean, everything had a purpose. And one of the things that I really love about Rush, and still do, is that no two songs they ever wrote sounded the same. They never repeated themselves. So every album had something new to offer, a new vibe, just something for everybody. The very next album was 1977's A Farewell to Kings. This is one of my favorite Rush albums. You start with the title track, Xanadu, which is incredible. That's worth the price of admission of this album alone. I will admit that I couldn't get into Xanadu at first, the song, but after a while it's become one of my favorite Rush albums. I mean, that's the reason to pick this up. And one of the things I forgot to mention before was with 2112, the previous album. That's when they started working with a guy named Hugh Syme, who created all of their album covers basically from 2112 all the way to the end of their career. And Hugh Syme is an incredible artist. When you look at all of his album covers, you see just how wide of a range that his skill was. Did a little bit of everything. The band just kind of told him what the album was, what they had in mind, and he came through every time. So this was another great album cover from Hugh Syme. Then you end this album with Cygnus X1. This is a long epic track, and I said before I was going to mention an extreme metal band that, to me, Cygnus X1 sounds like Meshuggah. So there's a section in that song that's just this off-time thing that Meshuggah is known for, and I hear that and I go, that's Meshuggah right there. So there's an obvious tie between Rush and more extreme metal bands and more technical progressive metal bands right there. So very cool stuff. And in fact, I read an interview with Thomas Hockey from Meshuggah, and the question was, if there was one band out there that you would want to hear cover your band, who would it be? And he said Rush. He said, I know they could pull it off, and I agree. I think they could. So A Farewell to Kings is a fantastic album. If you've never checked it out, please do. That leads us into the next album, Hemispheres. So I'm holding this up, but here it is right here as well. So you kind of get, it's kind of known for the naked dude standing there, but you get kind of the two halves of the brain, the more creative side, the more wild side, and the more reasonable side, I guess, kind of going together. So you get the hemispheres of the brain. That's kind of where that comes from. Hugh Syme did the artwork again. Terry Brown produced. This is a fantastic record, and this has really become one of my favorite Rush albums. And I just realized that, I guess when I bought this, they had a black album cover, because I guess showing a butt was too much. I mean, let's censor Rush, why don't we? But anyway, this is a great album right here. It starts with Cygnus X1 Book 2, so it's a sequel to the original Cygnus X1. I think this is one of their greatest epics. It takes up the entire first half of the record. The second half of this record is just as good. You get the song Circumstances, which is a pretty good rocker. Then you get The Trees, which is excellent. I love that song. And then you get the jam session, La Via Strangiato. So great, so great. A lot of fun to listen to as well. But two fairly long tracks on here, beginning with the title track that's pretty long, and then La Via is a pretty long jam as well. But just an incredible album. Hemispheres, I mean, I only own 2 Rush albums on vinyl, and that's Moving Pictures and Hemispheres. I own everything on CD, but I'm starting to build up my vinyl collection. So you're going to see more and more Rush popping up behind me as we do more reviews and shows and whatnot. So Hemispheres is excellent. That brings us to one of their biggest albums, and that is Permanent Waves. Permanent Waves features the song Spirit of Radio, which you would hear on the radio all the time. You still do, I think, that opening riff. I mean, it as soon as it comes on. It's like, yeah! And then there's the song Free Will, Jacob's Ladder, which is a song that kind of took me a little while to get into, but it's actually pretty cool. Entre Nous, Just Between Us, it's kind of a song about relationships and whatnot. It has some really cool lyrics to it. Different Strings is probably the song that doesn't stand out as much as the rest. It's kind of a laid-back, chill song, but not bad. And then you end the album with one of my favorite Rush songs, and probably one of their heavier songs if you're really thinking about it, Natural Science. And that song is the jam. And that's probably my favorite song on the whole album is Natural Science. I just know when that song starts, it kind of starts out quiet and then it kicks in and it's on you for the rest of it. So great stuff there. So once again, Usain, Terry Brown, they're involved in the artwork and the production of this, and it sounds incredible. And this would be their biggest album up to that point. I don't think at any point in Rush's career did they ever really experience a slump or low concert ticket sales or anything like that. I think that they established their fan base early and just kept on rolling, and that would be evident with the very next album. If people weren't Rush fans by the time the next album came along, that one came along and just roped a lot more people in. So that's as far as we're going to go on albums on this video, but I do want to say I know that the sticking point for a lot of people that just can't get into Rush, I've heard a lot of times, I love the music, but I just can't get into Geddy Lee's voice. That's a lot of people. It's an acquired taste for sure. I know that a lot of times when people hear Rush for the first time, they don't realize it's a man singing. They think it's a woman singing. And Geddy's a great vocalist. I would say that Permanent Waves, this album right here, is the last album that Geddy hit these kind of high-pitched screams kind of in it. From the next album on, you didn't really hear it near as much. It wasn't as ear-piercing, I guess. It may be a little more digestible. But if you can get past the vocals, which once again I like, and just listen to it for what it is, it's something that makes them unique. But there are a lot of other bands, Coheed and Cambria, for example. Their vocalist has really high vocals like Geddy Lee. That's who it reminds me of. That's another band that owes a lot of their sound to Rush as well. So great albums up to this point. We're going to end part 1 right here, and then when part 2 comes along, you know what album's coming next. Stick around for the next episode and we'll pick it up there. So that gets us through Rush, Fly By Night, Caress of Steel, 2112, A Farewell to Kings, Hemispheres, and Permanent Waves. So we're riding the wave into the next video. Make sure you check us out over on Instagram at magma_chamber_metal. And until the next episode, part 2, keep headbanging.